אורחים יקרים. בפתיחת כנס הרצליה במרץ 2013, לפני מספר שנים, ניבאתי שהמנהיג הרוחני של איראן יסכים להיכנס למשא ומתן עם המעצמות על תוכנית הגרעין בתמורה להסרת הסנקציות על איראן. אמרתי אז שההחלטה שלו לא תלויה בהכרח בניצחון של נשיא כמו רוחני או נשיא אחר, אלא זה יהיה דיל שיאפשר למנהיג הרוחני
the other participants of leadership to leave their regime in light of the sanctions. Those days were days of tension vis-a-vis Iran. Everyone was talking about aggravating the sanctions and taking very heavy moves and steps. There was no mentioning of trying to reconcile things. When I stepped off the podium, people did not talk to me. They thought that I was delirious. Several months later, the United States, headed by President then Barack Obama and other superpowers, as well as Germany, said that they agreed to negotiate with Iran regarding the nuclear agreement. My prophecy, so to speak, was based on the lab. I built with my students a decision support system for the Iranian leadership, meaning a system that would reflect the calculations of the Iranian, not from the Israeli side or the American side, but rather from the Iranian point of view. And I, of course, used specialists, a team of researchers from the political psychology department held an in-depth survey and research where we retraced 30 decisions of Iranian leadership that revolved around nuclear issues. Then we put it into the decision supportive system. We fed the system with some decisions that were, and then the analysis of the decisions. So this was not mere speculation, but it had some scientific background, scientific basis. It was based on the mathematics behind this analysis. Everything pointed at the same direction. The Iranians are going to leave their lofty ideals and they'll go into negotiation for the benefit of lifting sanctions. Remember that at the time, the president shared this move of sanctions, and now my forecast is that Iran is headed toward a nuclear bomb. This is not what Bibi exposed last night, but way worse. They're way more advanced than what Netanyahu showed. The Iranians are going to go for the bomb out very extrovertly, and no one is going to later on be able to blame them that they were trying to hide something. There's a change in the decisions of the Iranian leaders, and the calculation is based on the decision science. In one word, we can sum up what happened in this last summer, the way things turned about. The word is deterrence, or lack thereof, of the American vis-a-vis the Iranian. We have to say that Iran is getting closer and closer to promoting its nuclear plan. Right now, they're not giving any justifications. They don't care what Israel, the Gulf countries, or the United States say about that. Well, we have internal elections and disputes, and our society is so factioned. They're very meaningful development in the past 3 months in the Iranian arena. They have happened just recently. The nuclear agreement signed between Iran and the superpowers at the time of Obama was not good at all. It had big holes. It was quite problematic in many aspects. But my estimation is that if there is an agreement between Rouhani and Trump, that agreement will be even worse than the previous one. Or Rouhani, if the agreement is better, or the $150 billion the Iranian already received, and now they're going back for another round that is headed towards a track of nuclear. If it used to be under supervision and it was done maybe in hiding here and there, now they're doing it out there. They're not hiding anything. The policy community, the politicians and media are way, way behind vis-a-vis these developments. And I'll explain. 3 things have happened in this summer. These are absolutely a game changer for Israel and the world regarding the nuclear Iran. At this point, I go back to say the victory is on the hand of the Iranians. Simply, they're very, very good at negotiating. It's well known, historically so, and it is well reflected in the way they conduct themselves with the superpowers. The foreign minister Zarif is appearing at the G7. They're not accepting the French suggestions. I'll explain. What are the reasons that made the summer excellent from the viewpoint of the Iranian leadership? Three dimensions. The first one is the political, the decrease of risk in the Iranian regime. The second one is deterrence, and the third one is financial or economical. The political dimension of the Iranian decision. President Trump said that it does not want any switch in the regime, any change in the regime. We have to understand that this is the most important thing for Iranian leadership, and toppling that is what they feared most. The moment the president said that he's not interested in a swap or switch of the regime, they now can disregard the world. He said that the Iranians said, well, that's great if Trump doesn't want to change leadership. This is the most important thing for us. He let it go so we can move forward with our nuclear program. Does it sound so very simple? No, not at all. In-depth research that we have done at the IDC, in retracting their decisions, we show that unlike their image, they're very rational, they know very well what they're doing, and in the financial aspect, Iran recently signed an agreement, a financial agreement with China, $400 billion, $400 billion. It's a fantastic sum of money for a long duration of time. It just did it several weeks ago. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu have their own strategy constructed. They're talking about aggravating the sanctions, putting the Iranian on their knees, bringing them to the negotiating table. This strategy of maximum pressure has a very good intention, but it's not realistic. It is only wishful thinking. That's the way I call it. And the reason for that is these huge agreements of Iran with Syria, with Russia, China, and also very up and running commerce with Turkey. If you don't close completely the sanctions, you think that they are difficult, but they're not suffocating Iran. There's a difference between suffocating $400 billion in even more so sales of oil of Iran to China. This will serve both sides. It's part of the strategy of the Chinese through the Belt and Road strategy. So, as far as the Chinese are concerned, it matches their strategy. But if on the one hand, the United States is suffocating Iranian with very, very difficult sanctions, but on the other hand, Russia, China, and Turkey and others are building up the trade with Iran, so you can say that sanctions may be impose a lot of difficulties. They're really, really trying to suffocate Iran, but are not hermetic. They're not closing off everything. They might be difficult, but there's still some oxygen, so to speak. The third thing, so we see a change on the political. All of a sudden, they see that there's no threat over their regime. Secondly, financially speaking, we believe that these are sanctions. This is what we hear, but it's not fully sealing the possibilities. And the third one is deterrence, military-wise. Trump did not attack after they put down the airplane. It's not as if the United States said that it's going to attack Iran, but it did not say that it wouldn't do it. And there is a military option, and they said everything is on the table. The Pentagon was getting ready. But this change in the military aspect is another reason for which Iran is walking very confidently towards the nuclear arms. Trump explained that 150 people could be killed if there is an attack and a counterattack. The Iranian looked at the 12 points of the Foreign Minister Pompeo and the very harsh standpoint of John Bolton. All of a sudden, the Iranian received a gift, this declaration by an American leader, where the Americans are not going to use force against them. And they said, well, that's great if they're not attacking us. We are quickly going towards the nuclear weapon. And we do it very extrovertly. If they're not waiting, they're not interested in switching their regime, and on the background, Iran is signing these huge trade agreements. There is no prevention. Why the Iranians should not go ahead with the nuclear plan. It changed the calculation of the Iranian, and in a minute, I'll exemplify this. The assumption is that the Iranians would go down on their knees because of sanctions is not based on anything. Even if they do negotiate with Trump, time is on their side because they're always moving ahead in their nuclear plan. What Netanyahu exposed is what they did previously, what they were trying to hide. But since then, they're in a completely different place, ladies and gentlemen. They're really advanced, and so they're going to be at a way better advantage, and they'll find a president at the time of elections, a president that said that he's not going to use force. So, ladies and gentlemen, Iran is on their way to nuclear weapon. Nobody is stopping it, and by the time they'll go into negotiations, it'll make even further moves. And it will declare that it's doing so. Maybe the agreement is going to impose more limitations on ballistic missiles. The Iranians are moving in a way of rotation. Shabtai here knows. First they do like this. They limited the nuclear plan, and now they're going to limit the missiles. So they'll go back to the nuclear plan. They'll move ahead there. Guys, they are moving ahead very quickly, and no one is stopping them. And they're doing it out there. They're not trying to hide anything. They are champions in negotiations, and so they refused the French suggestion. They know that they can get an even bigger sum. So I'll exemplify this with the decision-making system, supporting the system of the Iranian leadership. I presented it in 2013, and I'll show you the difference. I'll do it in minutes. We have to understand something else. The Iranian regime, largely speaking, has two large systems of decision-making. The one has to do with everything with nuclear. This is President Rouhani and Foreign Minister Zarif. The second one has to answer to the regime, and this is the revolutionary regime. It has ownership in Syria, Bahrain, and other places. It is an organization which is bureaucratic. It has its own agenda, it has its own interests. Sometimes it's even going against Rouhani. One of the reasons why Iran attacked targets in the Gulf was trying to see the borders of this area. It paid off because they found out that Trump changed his opinion and he's leaving Israel on its own. And now I'll show you very quickly this system. So, in 2012, 2013, I built together with my students a computerized decision support system which represents the Iranian decision-making system. This has to do with the nuclear topic. The decision support includes the entire range of options, the entire range of alternatives. It lists all the reasons that can affect the decision. This is in order to forecast and to conclude what is the Iranian decision as a function of an algorithm. So what do we have here? We have many alternatives, 5%, stop at 5% enrichment, stop at development short of a nuclear bomb. This is the entire range of alternatives that they presented prior to 2013. And there are many other criteria.
Desire to export the revolution, hegemonic aspirations.
And there are many other things that affected them. This is a very big metrics of decision-making. Why can I not switch the slide? Okay. So what do we see now? For example, those who have a weight of 10, the most important things For them, it's the regime. It is regime survival. It is the American political and military and financial view. So what do we see? We see that things have changed. If you see there was a result of 8 at regime survival stop short of a nuclear bomb, but right now it's 10. They're quite sure they're in this field. No one is doing anything. Develop capacity for several bombs, plus 8. And develop a nuclear bomb, this was -10. It was an immediate threat, very clear threat over the Iranian leadership. It was coming from Trump's policy. And right now, it is pretty vague, this thing. So I put it only at -5. And this, they're still there. And we have here, regarding U.S. position, U.S. military position, we can also see that it moved forward. What do we mean? They have this gap of developing a reaction. The American reaction is ambiguous. It can go either way. They're not sure that they will see any force used against them. So this is not something that prevented it previously. And regarding the financial aspect, once again, state of the economy, this is the last dimension here. All of a sudden we see that developing capacity for short of a nuclear bomb, it's not so terrible. The effect is not going to be so harmful. A capacity for several bombs, it's not that bad. And even developing a nuclear bomb, because the sanctions do not close off everything here completely. So it's not as grave as the American would like to see it. And so in these 3 dimensions regarding decision makings, all calculation had changed. They're now racing towards the nuclear weapon. I'll end with several more words. And this is one other thing, something that I call going from deterrence to deciding the battle, so to speak. Iranians switched from deterrence towards deterrence and deciding the results. This is why they're not reacting against attacks in Syria. They're building their military capacity. They want to get to a decisive time against Israel. They're very serious at it. This is together with Hezbollah, al-Jihad, this cooperation that they do with Hamas, etc. So the reason for which Hezbollah and Iran hardly react to any attacks that Israel is doing in Syria, according to foreign media, this is their strategy. They're reserving their huge arsenal of missiles for a case where Israel attacks Iran. This is their deterrence, knowing that there's going to be very grave harm to the home front for the many sensitive facilities in Israel. We have to look into the potential inclusion of laser One other sentence, the nuclear bomb is going to make our lives in Israel way more complicated, maybe unbearable even if there's no use of force, because the fear of using this bomb will bring, as people before me said, to the end of the Zionist enterprise. Maybe newcomers will not come here, many will leave Israel, not to mention an existential threat. Israel is quite alone vis-a-vis the Iranian threat. In the last 3 months, there are very concerning developments, and we are not in agreement amongst ourselves, and it's a problem. Thank you very much.